Good evening, I'm Klaudia Czerwińska and you're watching World News Tonight live from Warsaw. After Sunday's ceasefire talks between representatives of Ukraine and the US, the time has come for Russians to sit down at the negotiating table again and have a similar conversation in Riyadh. More on that in just a moment, but before we dive in, let's take a look at tonight's headlines. EU warns Turkey to uphold democratic values as authorities escalate a crackdown against the opposition and free media. Greenland's leaders criticize this week's planned high-profile US visit. Poland to face Malta in a FIFA World Cup qualifier match in Warsaw. And we begin with today's biggest topic. Delegations from the US and Russia met in Riyadh following a similar discussion which took place between the US and Ukraine on Sunday. One of the key elements of the talks involved potential terms and conditions of a maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea. Meanwhile, Russia continues its ruthless bombing of Ukrainian cities. Did the Monday meeting in the Saudi capital bring an end of the war in Ukraine closer? Marek Steele tries to provide an answer to this question.
Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. This is where the future of the war in Ukraine could be decided.
This time it's a more technical level. Military, diplomats, representatives of our Ministry of Energy. I've just spoken to Rustem Umerov and he informed me about the meeting in the course of the negotiations. Our team is working absolutely constructively.
A key point of the talks between the US and Russian delegations on Monday was a possible maritime ceasefire in the Black Sea. Washington is aiming at a separate Black Sea deal before it's possible to secure a wider agreement. The deal might resemble the Black Sea Grain Initiative, which allowed for a safe export of grain from Ukraine before Russia pulled out.
Last months, there are not so many hostilities in the Black Sea at all because the Russians have seemingly evacuated everything that remains of their Black Sea fleet.
Monday's talks followed negotiations held between the United States and Ukraine on Sunday. And another overnight air attack on Kyiv and Sumy, which left dozens of people wounded.
Instead of making hollow statements about peace, Russia must stop bombing our cities and end its war on civilians.
Russia's main talking points ahead of any peace talks included guarantees that Ukraine won't join NATO, reducing the size of the Ukrainian armed forces, and Kyiv ceding Crimea and its four easternmost administrative regions to Moscow. Kyiv has said that any peace deal must include the return of Ukrainian territory to its pre-2014 borders. Despite these obstacles, the United States has been pressing on with the talks. The first round of negotiations took place in February between the US and Russia.
We have learned over 8 years of the Minsk process, and this is the experience that we want to explain to the American counterparts. We had 80 rounds of negotiations. We have 20 ceasefires.
On March 11th, the Ukrainian delegation agreed to a 30-day ceasefire proposed by the US. Russia said it agreed in principle, but laid out a number of issues that eventually made a real truce impossible. Dubbing US President Donald Trump the US envoy in charge of the talks, said on Sunday that he believes Vladimir Putin wants peace.
I just don't see that he wants to take all of Europe. This is a much different situation than it was in World War II. In World War II, there was no NATO. So you have countries that are armed there. I take him at his word in this sense.
Although the negotiations have already led to the release of prisoners of war and the return of Ukrainian children taken by Russia is being discussed, those deployed to the front lines are more skeptical about their outcome.
There will not be any peace, not the kind that we would like to see.
Donald Trump said on Monday he expected to soon sign a deal on Ukrainian critical minerals, which Washington has demanded Ukraine share in exchange for support. Marek Steele, TVP World.
And he's been through a lot.
And we're staying on the peace talks, which continued in the Saudi Arabian capital earlier on Monday. We're now joined by our Ukraine correspondent, Oz Karaji, who took a closer look at the details of today's meeting. So, good evening, Oz. Can you give us the main points of the proposed peace deal?
Well, yeah, it must be said that while these are the proposed things that they're going to talk about, there's not necessarily any indication that they're going to be successful in coming to some sort of agreement with them. The first one really to look at is the Black Sea ceasefire proposal, which would it sounds very similar to the already tried grain corridor proposal. But it must be said that over the last couple of years, Ukraine has effectively pushed the Russians out of the Black Sea using their own campaign of naval unmanned drones targeting Black Sea vessels and sinking them. So it's unclear how much activity is going to really be ceased if this agreement is reached between the two sides. Ukraine unilaterally has been using the Black Sea for some time to ship grain. Next will be the critical infrastructure. Now, again, this is something that was supposed to be in place at the moment, but hasn't been, despite Russia saying they were going to adhere to it. We have had continuous attacks. So this is going to be one that's not just difficult to agree to, but also very difficult to implement with no structure behind monitoring or punishing violations. The next big issue, this is the biggest issue and shows the difference between the two sides really, is the one of territory and security guarantees. Russia wants territory, Ukraine wants security guarantees. Ukraine doesn't want to give territory to Russia. It's Ukrainian territory after all, and Russia has illegally invaded and illegally annexed that territory. And Ukraine isn't willing to give any of that up politically. Now, maybe they're forced into a position after several years of fighting that they agree that they won't fight on that territory, but they won't give it up politically. They will hope to retake that territory through diplomatic means. That's been mooted around Kyiv for some time now. And the other one is security guarantees. The Americans haven't really been keen on issuing security guarantees. This is part of the coalition of the willing, Starmer, Macron, talking about a potential peacekeeping force on the ground in Ukraine. Again, these are really difficult things to come to any kind of agreement with, and ones that Russia absolutely doesn't want to. So until they can bridge the side of territory and security guarantees, there's not really going to be any movement towards a wider ceasefire, no matter how much the White House says it is. And at the moment, we've still seen no movement in either direction on those issues. The final thing for these talks will be the mineral deal that Trump wants Ukraine to sign. That's going to be on the side. You know, Ukraine's basically on the sidelines of this summit in Riyadh at the moment. This is really discussions between the US and Russia still at this stage. Now, we've had further attacks in Ukraine targeting Sumy, where a school and a hospital was hit. 88 people have been reported injured by local authorities, and 17 of them are children. Now, President Zelensky spoke out about this, saying currently a rescue operation is still underway in Sumy. All services are involved: the state emergency services of Ukraine, the national police, medical services, our communal services. There are a lot of victims. As of now, almost 90 people are known to have been injured, 17 of them children. The epicenter is a school, residential buildings. Fortunately, the children at school were in a shelter, so the children being in a shelter there averted more casualties happening in this horrific attack happening in Sumy, that the rescue operation is still underway. That was President Zelensky's words there. So it's a really difficult position for Ukraine to be in under these strikes, while having to have these talks with Russia, who have shown no signs of making any concessions at the negotiating table so far.
Thank you, Oz. That was Oz Chatterjee reporting live from Kyiv. 10 journalists detained, limited access to social media platforms, and restricting internet access in the country are only some of the tactics used by Turkish authorities and law enforcement to curb the ongoing protests sparked by the arrest of Ekrem İmamoğlu, mayor of Istanbul and President Erdogan's greatest political opponent. The European Commission on Monday urged Ankara to uphold democratic values. Regardless of the clampdown, the protesters are not backing down as tensions have reached a boiling point. Aisha Badji has the latest on the situation in Turkey.
Tens of thousands have taken to the streets in Turkey in the largest anti-government protests the country has seen in over a decade. Riot police filled the air with tear gas and doused demonstrators with water cannons in major cities. More than 1,000 people, including 10 journalists, were detained protesting the jailing of the mayor of Istanbul, who's been arrested on alleged corruption charges and stripped of his powers awaiting trial.
Another dawn raid, another attack on journalists. Journalists reporting on events and conveying truth to the public are fulfilling their duties and responsibilities to society. Stop your policies of pressure and silencing against journalists.
But President Erdogan blamed the opposition for the protests.
These events are the result of the main opposition leader calling on the people to take to the streets following an anti-corruption operation in Istanbul, which quickly turned into a violent movement.
Since the protests began, multiple accounts on X belonging to the opposition figures have been reportedly blocked. The platform responded to the blocking orders with the following statement.
We object to multiple court orders from the Turkish Information and Communication Technologies Authority to block over 700 accounts of news organisations, journalists, political figures, students and others within Turkey.
Turkey is a kind of semi-authoritarian regime, has become increasingly authoritarian, let's say, in the last 10, 15 years. So what has happened just now with the arrest of the leader of the opposition seems to be kind of extension of that trend.
The regime's crackdown on the opposition Republican People's Party is putting the Turkish economy and Ankara's international relations at further risk.
Political instability is the main risk factor in the eyes of foreign investors in Turkey.
We have a geopolitical environment situation where European Union needs Turkey because of Turkey's big army, strong defense industry. This makes the leverage of European Union countries weak, but still they have some leverage. It's not true that only European Union needs Turkey. Turkey needs investments from European unions.
In a show of resistance against the government's decisions, İmamoğlu's Republican People's Party held a primary to officially name him as a presidential candidate. Some 15 million votes were cast in support of the mayor.
İmamoğlu is very popular in Turkey. It seems that he's much more popular than Erdogan himself at the moment.
The European Commission is also looking at Turkey. On Monday, EU urged Ankara to uphold democratic values as Turkish authorities escalate a crackdown against the opposition and free media.
The Greenland saga continues. The island's leaders have criticized this week's planned high-profile U.S. visit to the semi-autonomous Danish territory. The delegation will be led by Usha Vance, the second lady of the United States, wife of Vice President J.D. Vance, and will include White House National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Energy Secretary Chris Wright. Sonia Gatabishchan reports.
Preparations are underway for the United States visit to Greenland, even if Washington seems to be coming uninvited. Coupled with Vice President J.D. Vance's most recent remarks that Washington will take Denmark's self-governing island if necessary, the trip is drawing considerable attention.
This is what President Trump is going to do because he doesn't care about what the Europeans scream at us. He cares about putting the interests of American citizens first.
Amid repeated threats of annexation by the U.S., residents of Greenland are battling fatigue.
It's getting a bit too much with Trump's interest in taking over Greenland.
Vance's wife, Second Lady Usha Vance, is coming to Greenland this week. The Washington delegation is also expected to include National Security Advisor Mike Waltz and Energy Secretary Chris Wright. The reported purpose of the trip is to explore Greenlandic heritage and attend the national dog sled race. But Greenland's outgoing prime minister is skeptical.
We're now at a level where it can in no way be characterized as a harmless visit from a politician's wife. What is the National Security Advisor doing in Greenland? The only purpose is to demonstrate power over us. It is a charm offensive aimed at pulling Greenland towards the U.S. There's no appetite for this in Greenland, and there's no appetite for it in the kingdom either.
As part of their visit, Waltz and Wright are allegedly also planning to visit the Pitofik space base in the north of Greenland, a U.S. military installation that is home to parts of Washington's ballistic missile early warning system.
We will never become Americans because we are Greenlanders.
Having slammed the visit as a highly aggressive, Greenland's prime minister said that his caretaker government would not meet with the U.S. delegation. Given the numerous advances coming from President Donald Trump, it hardly comes as a surprise.
We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it.
Greenland's March parliamentary election saw the Democrats' party, which advocates for a gradual path to independence from Denmark, emerge as a winner. The party's leader said he hopes the election results are a signal to Trump that Greenland is not for sale.
No matter what they think, Greenland is our country.
Greenland's defiance to U.S. advances was also reflected in a recent demonstration and in a joint statement of all 5 parliamentary party leaders. Outgoing Prime Minister said that until recently, Greenland could trust Americans, its allies and friends, but he added that that time is over. For TVP World, I'm Sonia Gatabiszczan.
Sławomir Mentzen, a Polish libertarian presidential hopeful, is on a mission to garner as much public support as possible ahead of the upcoming presidential election set to take place on May 18th. The candidate is known for his active campaigning on social media as well as pro-Russian, anti-Ukrainian sentiments that previously sparked controversy. Our chief political correspondent, Aaron Damon, has the story.
Sławomir Mentzen is on a mission for attention, running to be Poland's next president on a far-right libertarian ticket. He was never expected to get close to right-wing candidate Karol Nawrocki, who's backed by the major opposition Law and Justice Party, but polls are putting them neck and neck behind centrist frontrunner and Warsaw Mayor Rafał Trzaskowski.
I think that people need change here in Poland because they are tired of the politics, they are tired of the war between those 2 leading parties.
Mentzen's quickly found his groove, drawing support on social media, smashing out one rally appearance after another, and often running or zipping away on an electric scooter to avoid questions from mainstream media.
I found out about Mentzen from TikTok and from my friends. I came here to listen live because there's a lot about him on social media. He's an interesting person.
He is active on social media, for example on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and the very persona of this person intrigued me to come and listen to what he has to say.
At the same time, he's faced backlash for his pro-Russian narratives and rhetoric around Ukraine. In an exclusive interview with TVP World, Mentzen's press spokesperson went on the defensive.
We are not anti-Ukrainian, but we think that in every action every politician is taking in Poland, we need to think about Poland first.
It comes as Nawrocki struggles to make inroads with voters and shake off Mentzen's momentum. Though in a rare response in English this month, Nawrocki was trying to keep a smile on his face.
I'm fully confident and my campaign is going very well.
On Monday, he met with current President Andrzej Duda, but that too was a week after Sławomir Mentzen himself had sat down with Duda at the presidential palace.
Confederacja almost getting 20% in this in the polls, and Mentzen has chance to go to the second round. That would be a revolution on the Polish political scene, and even the right-wing members of Law and Justice and the president see that and react to that.
A source close to Rafał Trzaskowski's campaign told TVP World they still expect Nawrocki to finish in second place on May 18, ahead of a final face-off on the 1st of June. But they also say they're prepared for Sławomir Mentzen. Aaron Damon, TVP World.
Is this going to be a game that will see Poland emerge victorious against Malta's football team? The FIFA World Cup qualifier match in Warsaw is set to begin in a matter of minutes, and it provides a chance for the home team to redeem themselves after a game against Lithuania on Friday. A match won in an underwhelming fashion that left many fans disappointed. Does Poland have a chance for a victory? Konrad Gorlinski has more on the story.
The Polish national team and football fans alike are preparing for Monday night's World Cup qualifying match against Malta here at the National Stadium in Warsaw.
When you look at Malta's previous matches at home like this, they were very threatening and many teams had problems. Here, you could see in this match that they move smoothly to the counterattack and they are dangerous too.
Now, this match follows Poland's first World Cup qualifier against Lithuania on Friday, in which the Poles finally took 1-0, but only barely, following a late goal by star FC Barcelona striker Robert Lewandowski. Now, despite the win, there was a noticeable lack of excitement in the stands, with fans leaving less upbeat than when they had arrived.
Well, frankly, it was a very underwhelming performance, and Poland looked rather kind of stagnant and lacking in ideas. Any vigour and guile seemed to be missing.
We're suffering. If you watch Polish national football, if you watch Polish national team, you're suffering.
With Lithuania near the very bottom of the FIFA rankings at 142, fans were expecting the Polish team to breeze past them with flair, but they got quite the opposite.
Everybody wants to see Polish national team playing effective football, playing beautiful football, scoring a lot of goals, creating many chances, and none of this happened against Lithuania, which was a big disappointment.
Many blame this on the national team's current manager Michał Probierz's defensive approach to the game.
For much of his reign, it's been this very kind of stale and stagnant football, which is a lot of media and fans are finding very uninspiring. And I think, we're just expecting a little bit more.
The personal choices of Michał Probierz are quite controversial. The tactics are not exactly clear. How do you want to play? What is the style of the national team?
Well, despite all this, Poland should be able to make it through. Luckily, it's found itself in a fairly comfortable group this time around. Following Sunday night's UEFA Nations League quarterfinal, we now know that only the star-studded Dutch team poses any real risk for Poland in Group G. It ranks above its other three rivals by a large margin. So can fans expect a more exciting game against Malta? Well, unfortunately, commentators aren't that optimistic.
Friday, how can you change a lot between Friday and Monday? But I hope this will be the case, and we're going to see a different style of the team, and also I'd say what the team under Michał Probierz lacks is courage. So we want to see more courage on the field. We want to see better decisions. We want to see also quicker football, more efficient football.
A win against Malta Monday night is not that important in the grand scheme of things, but in terms of morale, it's desperately needed.
Because once you actually get to a World Cup, you're not going to be playing Malta and Lithuania. You're going to be playing the big teams.
Meanwhile, in Group G, Lithuania and Finland are battling it out right now. Later on, we'll see San Marino take on Romania, Latvia face England, and Bosnia go up against Cyprus. Ahead of Poland's match against Malta, there are concerns floating around that star player Robert Lewandowski may sit this one out due to an injury suffered against Lithuania on Friday.
U.S. President Donald Trump said on Monday he expects a U.S.-Ukraine rare earth minerals deal be signed with Ukraine very soon. Meanwhile, peace talks in the Saudi capital continued between Russia and the U.S. on Monday as Kyiv and Moscow dealt blows in continuous attacks. Joining me now to discuss what could happen next with the Ukraine-Russia peace talks is General Ben Hodges, former commander of the U.S. Army Europe and Africa. Good evening, sir, and thank you for joining me on the program.
Thank you for the privilege.
I would like to begin by taking a look at some of the comments made by Steve Witkoff, special envoy. In an interview with pro-Trump journalist Tucker Carlson, he repeated various Russian arguments, for example, saying that Ukraine is a false country. And he actually asked when would the West recognize occupied Ukrainian territory as Russian. What do such sentiments say about the future of U.S. support for Ukraine?
Well, it's very concerning to me, and I think Ukrainians and others in Europe are concerned about this. The fact that our lead mediator parrots or Kremlin talking points better than Lavrov does, and it also has revealed a lack of understanding of the history, the geography, and what's actually going on. But I don't think they care, because I don't think that they know the Russians are absolutely not interested in a legitimate negotiated outcome of this conflict. And they've not been asked to make any concessions. All the demands have been made against the Ukrainian side. And so I think when you take all that, plus the continued attacks killing innocent Ukrainian people each night, unfortunately, I am very skeptical about these talks.
As sort of a, I would say, countermeasure, we have the talks of the coalition of the willing, which intensified over the past few weeks. Is the coalition a likely solution? And what would be the distribution of power? And most recently, would China be able to join?
Well, I think I've heard this suggestion about China. I think this would be a colossal mistake by all of us, particularly the United States, to somehow allow the door to be open for China to come in and be a part of any sort of peacekeeping force. You know, the Trump administration before the election, all they talked about was China as being the main rival. And now you're talking about a situation where China would be able to come in and not only play a key role, but they could end up controlling the area with all the minerals and all the other economic factors. So, I mean, it just makes no sense from an American standpoint. But I think Europe here has to really assume the leadership role. If it looks like the United States is not going to do it, Europe is going to pay the price. The consequences of a terrible outcome in this war mean millions more refugees coming into Poland, Romania, Germany, and elsewhere. No rebuilding, continued disruption of grain shipments. All of this is bad news for Europe. Europe's economy dwarfs Russia. And if you add together the military capabilities of all the European nations, they are significantly more capable than Russia. So I'm optimistic that Europe will discover its strategic backbone and do what needs to be done here to help Ukraine.
And following what you just said, sir, do you think that EU is currently in the right place to, in case the US administration decides to further withdraw from supporting Ukraine, the European Union is going to be able to support Ukraine to an extent to provide it with a certain sort of victory?
Well, it certainly has the economic power to do that. Earlier, you had referenced a coalition of the willing. I don't know that we'll get every nation in Europe contributing to some sort of ceasefire implementation force or doing what's necessary. But certainly with the decision by the German Bundestag last week, Germany is emerging as a leader, at least leading by example here. And when you combine that get momentum from Germany, plus what President Macron and Prime Minister Starmer have said in the past. And when I look at Poland and Finland, these are countries, Italy, countries that have real military capability. All that's missing is the political will and something or somebody around which they can all coalesce to help Ukraine defend itself and in turn defend Europe. Otherwise, we're going to have a real long-term problem.
Ukraine claims air defense is paramount. They claimed many times that air defense is paramount when it comes to protecting not only the airspace, but the military and the country. Could Germany actually send Taurus long-range missiles in case, for example, they would need replacement for the American ATACMS?
Well, certainly, who is probably going to be the Bundeskanzler, the German chancellor, once the coalition government is formed here in the next few weeks. He has said in the past that he would give Taurus to Ukraine. I hope that Germany will follow through on that. That would be a significant upgrade in capabilities. But of course, it's never just one weapon system. It's capabilities, but it's also the commitment, the very public commitment that Germany, France, UK, Poland, Finland, other countries say that it is in their interest that Ukraine is successful. And therefore, you're going to do everything necessary to help Ukraine win. Now, when you get the policy part right, the clearly defined strategic objective, then all the policies necessary can move forward. But if you don't get the objective right, then it's difficult to get the right policies in place.
Our time is slowly coming to an end, but before we go, how do you think that the Black Sea ceasefire is actually going to look like? What form will it take, and how do you think it's going to affect not only Ukraine's economy but also naval safety?
Well, I thought your colleague Oz did a terrific job explaining this earlier in the segment. I mean, Ukraine has already created the conditions for successful use of the Western Black Sea. The great Russian Black Sea fleet is nowhere to be found. But if it helps in any way build momentum towards a ceasefire, I'm not against it. But you can be sure that Russia will test any ceasefire. And if there's not a force in place to compel them to live up to it, then they will make a mockery of it, as they typically do.
General, thank you so much for joining me on the program. General Ben Hodges, former commander of U.S. Army Europe and Africa, was my guest.
Thank you.
And so this would be all for now here on World News Tonight, but please do stay tuned. We're back here on TVP World in just a moment with more news and features.